you'll be in the know. 1037 The Beat. So we're excited again to have everybody tuning in every Wednesday, 2 p.m. For our show. And thanks again for the comments during the week. And it really is inspiring to connect with and engage with so many people who are passionate members of the community. And it really gives me pleasure to be able to serve as the city manager for the city of Muskegon Heights. So it is, again, I want to thank the mayor and the council for giving me this privilege and this honor to serve in this capacity. And as I said, thanks to the messages. So I'm going to take time today throughout the show to respond to some of the questions or inquiries that occurred throughout the week. And hopefully we'll be able to knock those out. But just to give you an overview of the show, I'm going to be doing some housekeeping initiatives, take care of those things up front. But the gist of the show is going to be focused on Black Awareness Month. So there's a couple things, actually 4 things that I would like to cover. One is, and I've touched on this in previous shows, but I want to talk about it in greater detail. Redlining, historical, systemic, and structural mechanism for oppression for people of color, a legacy that's left over from slavery that really, in my opinion, doesn't get enough attention. Something else that you may have heard me mention in passing, but to delve into in greater detail, is the grandfather clause and what that means with regard to systemic and structural discrimination in the United States. And then in addition to that, sundown towns, concept that very few people are aware of unless you've experienced it or you read about it or heard about it or discussed it in elementary, middle, or high school. And then finally, the Baker's Rebellion of 1676. So I want to cover each of those topics in as best detail as we can, with given the time and the limits of our show. But we will try to work our way through those things in honor of the start of our Black Awareness Month here in Muskegon Heights, the month of February. Is always exciting to be able to go back and bring focus and attention to some of those issues that that we should be aware of and focused on throughout the year, but don't get the attention that they deserve. So before I start with that, the housekeeping. So no council meeting this Monday, past Monday, no council meeting for this coming Monday. Remember, our council meetings are the 2nd and 4th Monday of every month. This past month, January, we had 5 Mondays. And so that sometimes throws people off because we're used to the rhythm of every other week. So we have an extra week in this period between council meetings. So our next meeting will be the illustrious, wonderful Valentine's Day meeting on February 14th. And then the next meeting after that will be February 28th. So mark your calendars, 5:30 p.m. February 14th and 5:30 p.m. February 28th. Also, in between on February 21st, the Monday in between, there'll be a special session for the DDA and council members to listen to the presentation by the Smith Group. That, if I can remind you, is the product of the visioning process that was accomplished through a grant from the Community Foundation and funding from MEDC. So that is the process that we went through to visualize what we want our community to look like in 5 to 10 years, similar to a process that the city of Muskegon went through called Imagine Muskegon. This process we dubbed reaching the new Muskegon Heights. It involved various focus groups with business leaders, residents, stakeholders throughout the community and outside the community, um, that have an interest in the success of Muskegon Heights. And through that process, despite the pandemic, we were able to pull together feedback through survey and these focus groups, some virtual, some in person, walkthroughs in the community um, to solicit feedback, input, and thoughts about ideas and suggestions on how we could move our beautiful city forward, take it to the next level to reach that new Muskegon Heights. And so I'm excited to see the work that the Smith Group has done and how they've brought all of that feedback together in a final presentation for our DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, and for council to consider. So put that on your calendars, 5:30 p.m. on February 21st. All of this is weather permitting, so hopefully the onslaught of winter wonderland won't affect us and causing us to have to adjust any of those meeting times. I want to remind everybody that moving into 2022, we are placing a huge focus on the cleanup of our community, and so you will see the Fight the Blight in Muskegon Heights campaign kick off in the spring, and hopefully, I will have Mr. Morrow in here, the Chief of Inspections and Building, to be able to talk some more about what he has in store in rolling that out. Billboards, postcards, yard signs, the whole 9 yards, to be able to direct us and guide us in making Muskegon Heights beautiful again. Some other focus areas that we're looking at in 2022. The pavilion. So we're excited that this year the renovation process will begin on the pavilion, and I'm excited, looking forward to making that facility available to the community to be able to provide services. And with that project is anchoring a revitalization, another revitalization. I know we've gone through phases of restoration of Mona Lake Park, and so this is the next phase in that process. Projects to enhance the beach front, projects to address the flooding and drainage issues that plague the parking lot and the roadway there. The potential of establishing an outside amphitheater. Some of those concepts and ideas that have been pitched since 2008. I'm excited that we will be in a position to start moving some of those ideas forward to possibly reconfigure the entire usage of the park based on these projects. And I want to remind everybody, because we are getting ready to start demolition, about the shops on Sherman. So we announced back in the beginning of last year, the project was funded $1 million grant to be able to, from Eagle, formerly Department of Natural Resources, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, now Eagle, to clean up that site that is on the corner of Peck and Sherman. And as the first phase of construction of a new development there, with retail on the bottom floor and residential above, that's really going to change the face of that corner, and that demolition construction process should be beginning sometime in the March-April timeframe. So look forward to that. Other focus areas, and I have said it almost every show, and I'll continue to say it: building new houses in Muskegon Heights, because that is the method for us to be able to generate new revenue in our community to replace the lost tax basis that has been eroded over the last 10 years. I think the figure says that over the last 4 or 5 years, we have systematically torn down close to 400 homes in Muskegon Heights. And we have not built a new home in Muskegon Heights since 2014, I think that was only 3, and before that was 2004. The average age of our homes is around 85 to 90 years old, depending on who you talk to. So we need to focus our energy, our efforts in addressing our tax base through the revitalization of our neighborhoods and the restoration of homes in the neighborhoods, and more specifically, the development and infill of new housing. And that is a concept that spans from single family homes to duplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, um, lofts, from one end of the spectrum to the other. We want to be able to provide new housing solutions that will take you through every phase of life in Muskegon Heights, including senior assisted living. And so we are hyper focused in 2022 to begin building houses. So look forward to seeing the start of construction, digging holes to begin providing homes. And for those people who are concerned, we expect to be able to provide housing solutions, new housing solutions that range anywhere from the $40,000 range to the $280,000 range. So this program is specifically designed to serve our community, the residents of our community, to help transition residents from renting to owning, to be able to create wealth and to create intergenerational wealth, as well as transition people who want a bigger home from a smaller home. They may already be homeowners. And so this is an opportunity for them to transition from a small home to a bigger home, or from a large home to a smaller home. And so all of these solutions are part of the a vision that council has, and under the mayor's leadership. And so 2022 shall be the year that this kicks off, and I'm excited to see that happen. We begin building houses. That creates property tax revenues, that creates income tax revenues. When we have people who have left Muskegon Heights, maybe graduated, moved back to Muskegon because they couldn't find anything that they liked in Muskegon Heights, can now come home, and we need to provide them that opportunity. Um, Beyond building houses, I mentioned the Fight the Blight, and you've heard probably a thing or two about events. So we've had some open forums for community to come in and discuss the types of activities that we have routinely that go on in the community, and looking at how we can enhance the use of downtown space and public spaces with new activities throughout the year, and scheduling it in such a way that we can be collaborative in these events, that we can share space, we can share resources, and be able to showcase the beauty of Muskegon Heights, so that for our residents to enjoy, and from people outside the community to come in and enjoy what we know is a beautiful and warm and welcoming community here in the Heights. And so I thank Jennifer Ross and Kaya Thornton for co-chairing my committee around developing this events calendar and spearheading the effort to bring new events to the community. And I want to highlight one new concept in particular, and that's the Friday Night Live Street Fest. And so that concept is blocking off on Fridays Broadway from Peck to Baker, and being able to put food trucks out there, have live entertainment, live music, tables and chairs, and kick that off somewhere around the 6 o'clock time frame, 6 to 8, kind of a happy hour time frame with food and beverages, as a segue from our Muskegon Heights Farmers Market, which is also on Fridays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we have a bundle of events and activities that will be going on a weekly basis every Friday in the month of August. And so I'm excited to be able to see the mayor's vision around this Street Fest come to life. And so look forward to that in the month of August. Every Friday in August and hopefully extending into September, with a different focus on every Friday. So I think that's going to be an exciting enhancement to the activities. Of course, we expect the reestablishment of the festival in the park, which I have yet to enjoy since I've come to the city of Muskegon Heights. And so, unfortunately, it was canceled 2 years in a row due to COVID. So I'm looking forward to seeing the festival, the resurgence of the festival, by Black. And one of our marquee events last year, we were hoping to repeat and take it to the next level, Juneteenth on June 19th. And so far, we're planning an event that'll span 3 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 17th, 18th, and 19th, and culminate with a huge fireworks show on Sunday evening, the 19th, as we celebrate Juneteenth. So, a reminder on those events. Of course, constant focus in the community is road improvements. You saw this past year the paving of Hackley Street, which was a nice project that was quick hit, got in and got it done. And I must say, for all intents and purposes, it looks like they did a fantastic job on that. We're in the process of finishing Delano Street. So phase one of that was completed before the winter. As soon as spring hits, phase two will jump off, and that will be the paving part of Delano from Sanford all the way to Leahy. And then we are going out to bid for the Leahy project, which will go from Keating down to, I believe, Hackley on Leahy. And so I'm not sure if it goes all the way to Hackley, but that project will be a spring project that you should see that in motion in terms of fixing, addressing road improvements. And looking for new projects, we have a request into the state legislature to fund $7 million to redo Broadway. And my thanks go out to Representative Sabo and Senator Bumstead for taking that project forward and presenting it to the legislature for funding. And if you have an opportunity, pick up the phone and give your legislators a call and urge them to move forward and working on granting that $7 million to redo Broadway from end to end. And we look forward to the chance to wrap around that project the facade improvements associated with the downtown businesses. This to me is the start of, or the anchor project to begin addressing the reconfiguration of Rowan Park, the Strand building, whether it's renovated or replaced with Strand 2. But retail on the bottom floor and 4 or 5 floors of residential space above. So many exciting things coming to Muskegon Heights, and um, it's all about reaching new heights. We're on the move, and that progress is in motion. So I hope you feel the excitement as you look around and see things begin to change and improve in our community. So we're excited about increasing our communications, working on revamping public works and providing them with some resources that heretofore have not been there because of financial constraints, looking at improving our hiring and staffing. These are all projects that we have on the horizon for 2022. So just a few announcements around that, and we probably will have a couple guests join in later on so that we can do some announcements before we close up. But with that, I'd like to jump into a conversation about our Black History topics. So if it is possible, let's see, we will, I don't think I can get the graphic up So let's start with a conversation about the grandfather clause. So, um, you've probably heard the term grandfather clause before. I know I've heard it in passing. It's something that's not unfamiliar to many of us, but really the origins of what the grandfather clause is something that I think we all need to be aware of. If you look it up and you Google it, it will tell you that the grandfather clause was a legal or constitutional mechanism passed by Southern states during the Reconstruction to deny suffrage to blacks. It'll tell you that it meant that those who had enjoyed the right to vote before 1867, and remember, wasn't until 1865 that the Civil War was over, and then it wasn't even then that black folks truly had the right to vote, as we pushed slavery aside, or we attempted to, at least in theory. But we were haunted with the Jim Crow laws that prevented African Americans from actually expressing the full range of rights as full citizens of this country. And so the grandfather clause gave those people who had the right to vote before 1867, aka not black folks, it gave them the right and their descendants to be exempt from the requirements, the Jim Crow requirements, that you have a certain educational attainment, or that you have property, or that you meet certain tax requirements. So if you were white, um, and you had the right, obviously you had the right in this country to vote before 1867. And if you had that right to vote before 1867, you didn't have to have property, you didn't have to have a certain educational attainment, and you didn't have to meet tax requirements. You could continue to vote. However, if you were black, a descendant of enslaved people, African American, you could not vote unless you had property, unless you could prove a certain educational attainment, and or that you paid a poll tax or a fee that was exorbitant in order to be able to participate in the election process. So the grandfather clause effectively disenfranchised all former slaves and the children of slaves from the right to vote. And the other side of this, which doesn't really get talked about, and the whole thing, grandfather clause, really doesn't get talked about, is the other side of this. This was used in other states to say that if you don't have the right to vote, then you don't have the right to own property. So if your grandfather was a slave, your grandfather did not own property, and therefore you, as a descendant of a slave, did not have the right to own property. So all those people after the Civil War, or even prior to the Civil War, that by hook or crook somehow gained ownership of property, under this grandfather clause, their property was stripped away from them. And there's specific accounts it talks about in Google about southern states, but there's specific accounts of record, even as far away as California, where the grandfather clause was used to as a legal mechanism to take land away from people of color. And so you lost your land, you lost your livelihood, and therefore, as a result, you were forced to have to either lease land, pay somebody else for the land, leave the land so that somebody else could use it to their desire, and more tragically than that, if that's possible, you lost the ability to vote to affect or change any of those laws that were instituted specifically focused on eliminating your right to be a full-fledged citizen in this country. So when you hear people say grandfather me in or the grandfather clause, I want you to remember to think about where that term came from, because it meant that if your grandfather was a slave, you effectively had no rights in those states that enacted the grandfather clause. So, important aspect of Black history that really changes the tide of, and I shouldn't say this was pivotal, but it is another brick in that pathway to to change the trajectory of people of color in this country. You couldn't vote, you couldn't own land. You know, those two things together are what essentially were the basis for the establishment of this country. One man, one vote. The forefathers of this country left England for the right to pursue their own destiny, to eliminate aristocratic state and the pursuit of happiness out the window with the grandfather clause. The next topic I want to touch on is, and feel free to enter into the chat if you have any comments. Let's see. I think we had a few comments that came in. Thanks to Kellen Reed for saying hello, and the Street Fest idea. Appreciate the shout out on that. I want to touch on sundown towns, and you'll see guest Ray Early, who's joining the show to talk about the testing that the city's doing, and we'll bring Ray in to talk about that in just a minute. But sundown towns. So if you have time to get on Google and go to Google the term sundown-towns, that'll give you insight to an aspect of history in this country that very few people talk about. Mostly in the southern states, the mid southern states, that this was an issue. But if you go on there, it shows you a map of all the states in the United States, and you can click on the state and search for your community or your town that you may have grown up on, and it'll let you know whether or not your town was classified as a sundown town. And that a sundown town is a town that was intentionally kept white. However, people of color were allowed to come into the community to work, to provide services, but they better not be caught in that town when the sun went down. And some of these communities would sound off a siren at that time. And if you were not out of that community and you were Black, when the siren went off, that meant that you were fair game for either arrest or assault, and so on and so forth. So it's amazing when you go to that site and look at sundown towns, the number of communities that are documented to be sundown towns, where they were unabashed about this idea that this was a white community and you could not be in that community after dark if you were Black. You could come in and work, and they realized that they needed cheap labor, but when the sun went down, you needed to get out. And so Mr. James Lowen, who was a civil rights activist, unfortunately passed away in 2021. It was his life's work to put together this registry of sundown towns. And put together the mechanism for people who did research, kind of crowdsourcing, who did research and could provide documentation to register that documentation on this website, that to show the communities that effectively kept people of color out. And thus, again, when you look at the value of real estate and where you live, and we'll talk about redlining next, prevented them from being part of the American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, except when and where you lived. And so these communities did not allow us to live there or be part of the quality of life that those communities offer. So if you get a chance, please Google sundown towns. If you look up Michigan and sundown towns, you will find that there's 4 or 5 communities, fortunately only 4 or 5 communities that show up as sundown towns in Michigan, at least that are documented on this website. So if you are aware of any other communities, I think it's Dearborn is documented, Melvindale, uh, Owasso, and Wyandotte are the ones that are specifically documented. But the process that was put together for this website was to allow people who had old newspaper clippings or documents that showed that it was illegal for people to be there after dark to be able to deposit that in their repository of information. So please take a look at that. And then I want to talk about something that you may have heard me mention before, and I think it's one of those pivotal pieces in the history of slavery in this country that does not get talked about enough, and that is Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion occurred in 1675. Um, uh, oh, yeah, almost 1675, 1676. It spanned over a year, and it was 100 years before 1776. And I'm sure that year rings a bell for everybody. The Independence Day for our country. But 100 years before was the Bacon's Rebellion, and it happened in Virginia. And why is Bacon's Rebellion so important? Well, at that time, slavery had not, chattel slavery had not been enacted in the form that we're aware of in this country. The mechanism for cheap labor in this country was indentured servitude. And so, for those people who came to this country, oftentimes they came as indentured servants, and that was a contract between you and the individual or family that you contracted with that said that you would provide labor and services for a fixed period of time. Oftentimes, it was part of an apprenticeship. So, if you wanted to be a carpenter, you would pledge yourself for 5 years to work as an apprentice carpenter. At the end of that 5 years, the agreement was that you would have fulfilled your contract, and once you fulfilled the contract, you were given either an animal, which was either a horse or a cow. You were given anywhere from 10 to 40 acres, and some firearm, whether it be a pistol or a rifle. Um, and that was the typical agreement, 5 years. And in that 5 years, you were able to learn a trade. You received room and board, and that was the contract and the agreement. So in Virginia in 1675, there were a number of people that were working as indentured servants, both white and black, and they were considered the poor because they didn't have the resources yet. But the idea was once they fulfilled their contract, they would be able to become self-sufficient and pursue their American dream, so to speak. Well, in 1675, a wealthy gentleman by the name of Bacon was upset about the fact that there was tension between the Native American tribes and the settlers that lived there. There had been some perceived attacks from Native Americans, and so he rallied people around this idea of going after the Indians, attacking the Indians in order to protect, quote unquote, their territory. And so he was trying to get resources from the colonial government to be able to go out and fight. He was not successful in getting resources in the very beginning. And so he looked for an opportunity to put together his own militia. And so he took advantage of the opportunity to rile up the indentured servants. And this is important because why was there an opportunity that he saw with indentured servants? Because the wealthy landed gentry of Virginia had recently moved to arbitrarily change the contracts for indentured servants. So, like I said, there was a 5 or 7 year contract. Well, at that time, the established contract was 5 years. And so the wealthy Virginians thought, well, we've got all these contracts that are going to be coming mature pretty soon. And then we're going to have to give those people 40 acres. And we haven't fully explored the area to take the best land for ourselves. So all these indentured servants are going to then, at the end of this 5 year contract, they're going to have a right to these 40 acres. So what they did is they passed legislation that changed the contract from 5 years to 7 years. And so you can imagine that this illegal action um, upset the indentured servants. And so what's not talked about is Bacon saw that opportunity to be able to pull together people who were already disenchanted about their situation and focus them on his objective. And so his objective was to go after the Native Americans. So the uh, the point of contention with the landed gentry was, no, we don't want you to do this, Bacon. Bacon put together his own force. They did exactly the opposite of what the local colonial government wanted them to do. And they took up arms, and there was a rebellion against the colonial government, as well as targeting of Native Americans. So it's interesting to see that the colonial government at that time was trying to stop people from going after Native Americans, because I think at that point they saw that they were outnumbered by the Native Americans, and that was just kicking a hornet's nest. But that soon changed when the numbers shifted. But here you had this rebellion. It took a year for them to put down the rebellion, and the pivotal aspect of this rebellion was, and if you look at the PBS series about this, and there is a series out there, and I encourage you to go out there and find the PBS series. Um, in the PBS series, and I'll read what they say. It says Bacon's rebellion demonstrated that poor whites and poor blacks could be united in a cause. Doesn't matter exactly what that cause was, but they could be united in a cause. This was a great fear of the ruling class. What would prevent the poor from uniting to fight them? This fear is attributed to hastening the transition to racial slavery. So why did they make that statement? Well, because when they put down the rebellion, they went after the leaders of the rebellion. Bacon got killed in the rebellion, but the rebellion went on for a period of time after Bacon's death. The leaders of the rebellion were 2 Anglos and 1 African American. And so when they went after the leaders of the rebellion, they found the African American guy like that, because he was difficult to hide, easily distinguishable. They were able to track him and find him. But the 2 white members of the rebellion, it took them over 5 months in order to locate and identify them before they hanged them. And so the discovery in that process was, one, we need to be able to separate poor black people from poor white people. And 2, we need a mechanism to easily identify who has the rights and who does not have the rights. And that's where that scholars today associate the move towards chattel slavery with this notion that if I could say that everybody that look like this has no rights versus people that don't look like this that have some level of rights, then we can keep them from working together. And so laws that came out of that were unique were, well, if you were black, you were a slave. And if you were a slave, you could be whipped. And if you were whipped, they had to take off your shirt. If you were poor and white, you could be whipped, but you had the right to keep your shirt on. And so that gave you a level of dignity under the law that distinguished you from the slave, but still said that you were a lower class. And so what's important about this, and the reason why I spend so much time on this, is because this is an element of what we talk about in critical race theory, which is part of the dissertation that I'm working on. That is misconstrued in the public as an evil thing. Critical race theory talks about these types of things because it identifies that as much as discrimination in this country is about race, it's also about power. And if we understand that it is about race and power, and some people will say that it's just about race, but if we understand the true dynamics of it, and this is what CRT gets at, in addition to exposing a lot of the history that is ignored and swept under the rug, but what it really gets at is that discrimination and racism has a mechanism of power that is driving and fueling the effort. In Virginia at this time, it was about power. They didn't care about the poor whites, they didn't care about the poor blacks. But as soon as they saw that they worked together, they were afraid that they were going to lose their power. So they began to develop a system that would allow them to maintain and control power by creating this separation between poor white folks and poor black folks. And that is attributed to the beginning of chattel slavery amongst most scholars. So I appreciate your patience in going through that, but I think it's a pivotal part about our history in this country that really doesn't get a lot of attention. And it is important, I think, to take the opportunity in Black Awareness Month to begin to enunciate and illustrate some of the aspects that are not talked about. Kellen Reed mentions that women did not have the right to vote until 1920, which is a very good point. And we've talked about on the show the Juneteenth reality, which is, it was months after the end of the Civil War before Black folks and enslaved people throughout the other regions of slave states even realized or found out that they were no longer required to be in servitude according to the law. So we will talk more about those things, but before we wrap up here with the few minutes that we have left, I want to welcome Phyllis Laudermill to the show. Again, welcome back.
Hello, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming on board with us and sharing an update on our effort to an element or aspect of our effort to get building off the ground here in Muskegon Heights. So the fabulous work that you are doing and bringing this solution, opportunity, advantage to Muskegon Heights. So I will leave it to you to make this next announcement.
Well, great. As always, you're doing an excellent job in history and talking about home ownership, and you're most right. I remember in Arkansas, the only two things we had to do was buy land and educate ourselves. And then I looked at what happened to us over the last 30, 40 years. When we moved to the projects, that was our first initiative, is that we would not be there forever. We went from German to Dyson. When we graduated, our initiative was to buy a home for our mother. And so I think some of the things that we do is just who was in us and where we lost it. So we have not always been like that in this community. We just forgot to educate our youngins and the young people and some of our old how to maintain homes. So we met, and we actually have a commercial that you will be seeing. So we officially rolled out the commercial for the apprenticeship for the realtors. Our first intake is going to be the 21st of February. And we'd like to do that at the City Hall, because that's where you started your house initiative. In that initiative, we're also asking young people in the community who is interested in owning their own home. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to be bringing Flagstar on, so that would be a good segue into that. So the 21st is the first intake, 5:30, City Hall. And then on the 28th is our first intake of looking at our applications. And we definitely want to make sure the city stay a part of that. And that is Keller Williams and the Loudermill Group.
So what's huge about this, we're not only talking about building homes and moving people into homes from rentership to ownership, but we're also talking about building a whole industry of jobs around this effort. that will recycle money in our community multiple times. And so the opportunity to be part of the process by being a realtor is a critical piece in this process. Not only because of the renaissance that we are embracing here in Muskegon Heights, but also getting the certification and the licensing to participate in the renaissance here, and also to be able to participate with that job and that certification in a career that can take you beyond Muskegon Heights into other communities. So this is all about renaissance, bringing a renaissance to the community and building wealth, building the systems to be able to create wealth for people that um, serve this community and have been born and raised in this community. So I'm excited about that. Um, Not only about the real estate and the realtor part, but also the apprenticeship programs that are involved with that we're bringing to the table, that you're bringing to the table with the building side and the development. Um, all of those are jobs for our community, and it's about high time that we create an opportunity for people in our community to be part of building wealth.
Well, the other two partners, and thank you for letting us see the most beautiful properties that Muskegon Heights has to offer. And we are moving into Muskegon Heights. But since then, yesterday, State Farm, and the reason why we did State Farm is because of the apprenticeship as well. You need to insure your home, and you need to have life insurance. So every facet of a business that can connect to home buying, I'm saying, come share your wealth with us,
Hmm.
partner with us, and create wealth by training people in the neighborhood so that they can afford those homes that they're wanting to build. And the title office, they came on board as well. So I'm excited about everything, all the way down to buying cabinets. We are looking at these buildings, say, listen, train people how to put cabinets in, train them how to put Corian tops in. Those are trades that for some reason we don't have the expertise in our neighborhoods. And if we do have them, we want them to step up to the plate so we can use them. But in case we don't, we want to create them as well.
Well, the other thing I want to commend you on is locating the business here in Muskegon Heights, and so that is setting the example and leading the way for other businesses that want to do business in Muskegon Heights, that want to provide services to Muskegon Heights, to locate their business here in Muskegon Heights. You've done that. I commend Councilman Jenkins for bringing his business here to Muskegon Heights, and those are the seeds of development and economic development and growth and renaissance that when properly watered and nurtured will grow into huge opportunities. So thanks again for that leadership. And I do want to and for your announcement, I wanted to respond to one of the comments that was here before we wrap up the show about an update. Mr. Weatherspoon says, when are we going to have existing property owners and landlords update and repair the current homes, not to mention junk cars and yard cleanup? So, yeah, very good point. Thank you for that comment. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Chief Morrow will be coming on the show, the Chief Building Inspector, in the next couple of weeks to talk about the initiative to address junk cars parked in the grass in the front of the yard, those types of things, and how we can rectify that, as well as addressing landlords and owners on the upkeep of their properties. So that's all part of Fight the Blight Muskegon Heights, and that will be kicking off here in the spring. So
I
stay
like
tuned
that.
on that. And also, we will be having DJ Hilson on the show next week. So please be prepared to tune in to hear from our guests, the prosecutor, and be able to ask questions. And I'm sure I'm looking forward to having him here and being part of this show. So be prepared to tune in next week for that. And I think we lost Ray in the show. Oh, all right, so you've got 60 seconds, Mr. Early, to talk to us about testing.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, we're currently doing testing in Muskegon Heights. You don't have to go to Muskegon. You don't have to go to Grand Rapids. You don't have to go to the hospital. You can come to the City Hall of Muskegon Heights from 2:30 to 5:30 on Thursdays. And also, we've been more than thankful to cooperate with the Laudermill Group and Lots Landing. We're doing testing at Lots Landing also on Thursdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're also currently doing testing for the school for the faculty and staff
At the high
for
school, right?
Muskegon Heights High School. Yes, the academy. Um,
And is there a
which
cost for this?
there's no cost. All of these tests are free, no out of pocket cost to you, whether you're insured or uninsured. If you're insured, just bring proof of your insurance, but no matter insured or uninsured, all you need is a government ID. If you have your driver's license, you can get tested.
What type
If
of
you
test is
This is a qPCR test. It's a PCR test. It's a lab test.
this?
We tell people the turnaround time is 2 to 3 days, but usually it comes back a little quicker than that. This is a lab test. It's the best test that you can get right now. Uh, it,
Reliability is in the 99% reliable.
yeah, it's the highest reliability, especially when you consider the fact that everyone has the ability to get the free rapid antigen test. Now, the
Mhm.
free rapid antigen test, they'll give false negatives, a lot of false negatives. But that notwithstanding, I tell people, even if you don't test with us, get tested.
Right.
Okay. Testing is the best mitigation for COVID in your community. You're not only helping your immediate family, your coworkers, but also your community. Your kids go to school every day. Your coworkers have families, and a lot of people have seniors in their household. A lot of people have people with compromised immunity in their household. The thing is to get tested. Get tested. You're around people, whether you're wearing masks, whether you're not wearing masks, whether you're fully vaccinated, half vaccinated, or non-vaccinated. You need to get tested.
The
It's
last thing
free. Hmm?
the last thing I want you to touch on is the type of test. It's not one of those like, cranial where it goes
No,
all the way
no,
back.
no. We won't make you scream, and we and we won't make your eyes water. It's just a simple swab in each of your cheeks. It's inside your mouth. It's non-invasive. It's child-friendly. We even test, like I said, we test schools and we test children. Okay, we test at Head Starts. So it's a very, very child-friendly and it's very easy. It's non-invasive, and it's the best thing that you can do for yourself, your coworkers, your family, and thereby your community.
Excellent.
Well,
Well, I'm sorry we don't have more time to go into more detail on that, but I appreciate you coming back on the show to share the importance of testing and the opportunities that exist in the community to get testing. And I believe also there's testing at Christ Temple, if I'm not mistaken. So, like
yes.
Mr. Early said, get tested.
Get
Even
tested.
if you're vaccinated, fully vaccinated, boosted,
That's right.
please get tested because you can still get COVID, and if you can get it, you can spread it. So you need to know what you need to know, so you'll be in the know, right? So
Hey, I've
re-
heard that slogan somewhere before.
And
there
no,
you
it's for chicken people.
go. Right. All right. Well, thank you for being guests for the announcements. Thank you to the community for tuning in. It is always a pleasure. I can't say it enough to serve in this capacity and to be able to share this information and dialogue with you and the community because Muskegon Heights truly is the city of friendly people. And we are on the march. We are embracing a renaissance. We are reaching new heights. So thank you for tuning in for a show where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know on 1037 The Beat.
When smoking gives you COPD, you learn to lie a little bit. You make up excuses